My parents kicked me out right before my final exams after accusing me of flirting with my brother-in-law. Years later, they broke no contact after discovering that I inherited all of my grandfather's inheritance. Now, they're trying to guilt me into sharing it. Hey Reddit. I, 23F, psychology student, never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here I am, still processing everything that's happened over the past few months. Sorry in advance for the length, there's a lot to unpack here. For context, I grew up in what I always thought was a tight-knit family. My parents, Mom 52F, Dad 54M, are both high school teachers who always had high expectations for me and my older sister Megan, 29F. And when I say high expectations, I mean impossibly high expectations, the kind where getting an A meant why not an A+. And second place in anything might as well have been last. Looking back, I can see that Megan was always the golden child. She's beautiful, smart, and seemingly perfect in every way. She graduated top of her class in business school, landed a great job at a marketing firm, and married her college sweetheart Nathan, 30M, when they were both 25. Initially, they moved into their own apartment, but about 2 years ago, they moved back to our family home when Nathan got a job at a tech company nearby. My parents were absolutely thrilled about this arrangement. They adored Nathan and treated him like the son they never had. Every dinner conversation somehow circled back to his latest promotion or some brilliant idea he shared at work. Nathan just got a raise at the office, where Nathan's team leader said he's on track for management. It was exhausting to hear the constant praise while my accomplishments barely received acknowledgement. I was in my third year of college, commuting from home because my parents had shot down my suggestion of living in the dorms. Why waste money when you can stay here for free? They'd argue. But freedom was exactly what I wanted, the chance to make my own decisions, set my own schedule, and just breathe without feeling watched all the time. Our house wasn't particularly large, a 4-bedroom ranch-style home in the suburbs with one bathroom that all of us had to share. My bedroom was the smallest, tucked at the end of the hallway with faded blue paint I'd been asking to change since I was 12. Every morning was a carefully choreographed dance of everyone trying to get ready without bumping into each other. I'd usually wake up at 5:30 a.m. just to have a few minutes in the bathroom before everyone else got up. I was balancing full-time studies with a part-time job at a local coffee shop, trying to save up enough money to eventually move out. On top of that, I was maintaining a long-distance relationship with my boyfriend, Ethan, 24M, who was studying engineering at a university 3 states away. We'd met at a summer academic program 2 years ago and had been making it work through video calls, texts, and visits whenever our schedules and finances allowed. My parents never approved of Ethan. They'd make these subtle digs about how some relationships just aren't practical or ask pointed questions like, "Don't you think it would be easier to date someone local? Someone more established?" The subtext was always clear: Ethan wasn't Nathan. He wasn't successful enough for their standards, even though he was working incredibly hard in a challenging degree program while maintaining a scholarship. Even though our house was often tense, I tried to keep the peace. I'd cook dinner 3 times a week, help with household chores, and generally tried to be invisible when Megan and Nathan were around. I knew my place in the family hierarchy, firmly at the bottom. Megan and I were never close growing up. She was 5 years older and always seemed annoyed by my existence. When we were kids, she'd exclude me from playing with her friends, and as adults, our interactions were limited to forced small talk at family dinners. "How's school?" She'd ask without making eye contact, usually scrolling through her phone before I could fully answer. Nathan, surprisingly, was much friendlier. He'd ask about my classes with genuine interest, sometimes offering to help with my psychology papers or bringing me coffee when he knew I had stayed up late studying. He treated me like a little sister, and I appreciated having someone in the house who didn't constantly compare me to someone else. But everything changed dramatically on a Tuesday evening in May, just before my final exams. I had been studying nonstop, surviving on minimal sleep and maximum caffeine, when my parents called me into the living room. Their expressions were deadly serious, and my stomach immediately twisted into knots. "We need to talk about these messages," my dad said, holding up my phone. Somehow, they had gotten into it while I was in the shower. I was completely confused. "What messages?" Mom's face was tight with anger. "We know you've been trying to seduce Nathan behind your sister's back." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I felt like I was in some bizarre alternate reality. "What are you talking about? I would never do that." They showed me these so-called texts between Nathan and me, but they made absolutely no sense. The messages were flirtatious and inappropriate, yes, but I had never sent them. The timestamps showed they were from times when I was either at work or in class, which I pointed out immediately. "I don't know where these came from, but they're not mine," I insisted, my voice shaking. "I would never do something like that to Megan. Nathan is like a brother to me, and besides, I love Ethan." But they wouldn't listen. It was like all those years of trust had evaporated in an instant. Dad was red-faced, pacing the living room with clenched fists, while Mom sat rigidly on the couch, refusing to look at me. "We want you out of this house today," Dad finally said. "We will not have someone like you under our roof." I begged them to let me talk to Nathan, to clear things up, but they said he was too disturbed by the situation to face me. In retrospect, this should have been my first clue that something wasn't right. If these messages were real, why wouldn't Nathan want to address them? With nowhere else to go, I called my grandparents, Dad's parents, in tears. They lived about 30 minutes away in a modest but comfortable home where I'd spent many happy weekends growing up. Grandpa, 78M, and Grandma, 76F, had always been my safe harbor when life at home got too intense. When I arrived at their doorstep with my hastily packed suitcase and tear-stained face, they welcomed me without hesitation. I showed them my phone, the real message history between Nathan and me, which consisted of nothing more than casual conversations about TV shows we both watched and occasional requests to pick up milk on the way home. They believed me immediately. "Your father has always been quick to judgment," Grandpa said with a sad shake of his head. "Ever since he was a boy." That comment revealed a whole history I hadn't been aware of. Apparently, my dad had always had a tendency to make dramatic, black-and-white decisions based on minimal evidence. Grandma shared stories of how he'd cut off childhood friends over perceived slights, how he'd changed his college major 3 times because professors had disrespected him. It was the first time I'd heard these details about my father's personality, and it helped explain so much about my upbringing. My grandparents let me stay in their guest room, which became my sanctuary. It was a small space with floral wallpaper and a creaky twin bed, but it felt more like home than my actual home ever had. There were bookshelves filled with classics that Grandpa loved to read, and a small desk by the window where I could study. Grandma would bring me tea while I was preparing for finals, and for the first time in years, I felt truly supported. But Dad couldn't let it be. A week after I moved in, he showed up at my grandparents' house while I was at my final exam. According to Grandma, he stormed in demanding they stop enabling me and accusing them of undermining his authority as a parent. Grandpa, who had always been the calm, reasonable one in the family, stood his ground. "She's an adult, Richard," Grandpa had said. "My dad's name is Richard. And she's innocent of what you're accusing her of. If you take a moment to listen instead of reacting, you might see that." This led to a shouting match that ended with Dad storming out, declaring he was done with all of us. He said some truly awful things to Grandpa, calling him senile and manipulated, words that I know cut deep. 2 weeks later, Grandpa had a massive heart attack. The doctor said it wasn't directly related to the argument with Dad, that his heart had been weak for years, but I couldn't help feeling responsible. If I hadn't come to them with my problems, would Grandpa still be alive? The funeral was small and dignified, just like Grandpa would have wanted. Friends from his retirement community, a few former colleagues from his days as a high school principal, and me and Grandma. My parents and Megan didn't show up. I found out later through my cousin that they were on a cruise in the Bahamas, a trip they had booked after knowing about Grandpa's passing. I was beyond devastated. Not only had I lost one of the few people who truly understood and supported me, but I also had to handle all the funeral arrangements myself. At 23, I had no idea how to plan a funeral, but I did my best, seeking advice from the funeral director and Grandpa's friends. I picked out a simple oak casket. Grandpa always loved oak furniture, chose readings that reflected his love of literature, and even managed to find his favorite classical pieces to play during the service. Ethan flew in for the funeral and stayed with us for a week afterward. He was my rock through it all, helping with paperwork, making sure Grandma ate properly, and just holding me when the grief became overwhelming. During this time, we converted the den into a temporary bedroom for him, with an air mattress that definitely saw better days. Every morning, he'd fold up his bedding and store it in the closet so Grandma could use the room during the day. It was during this difficult time that my parents suddenly reappeared. They showed up at Grandma's house unannounced about 3 weeks after the funeral. I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard the doorbell. When I opened the door and saw them standing there, Mom in her Sunday best and Dad with a forced smile, I nearly slammed it shut out of pure reflex. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not bothering to hide the ice in my voice. "We've come to check on your grandmother," Mom said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Can we come in?" I reluctantly let them in, and they made a beeline for the living room where Grandma was sitting with her knitting. I hovered in the doorway, feeling protective and suspicious. "Why weren't you at the funeral?" I finally asked after they'd exchanged awkward pleasantries with Grandma. Dad cleared his throat. "We were out of town. On a cruise," I specified, letting them know I was aware of the truth. "While your father was being buried." The tension in the room was suffocating. Mom shifted uncomfortably on the couch, while Dad's face tightened with annoyance. Ethan chose that moment to emerge from the bathroom. Dad immediately frowned. "What is he doing here?" Dad demanded, gesturing toward Ethan as if he was some kind of intruder. That was the final straw. Weeks of grief, stress, and anger came boiling to the surface. He's here because he actually cares about us, I said, my voice shaking. He took time off work and flew across the country to support me and Grandma while we buried Grandpa. Where were you, Dad? Who do you think arranged the funeral? Who do you think picked out the casket, or chose the readings, or selected the music that Grandpa would have wanted? Who do you think has been taking care of Grandma while she grieves the loss of her husband of 52 years? It certainly wasn't you. Dad's face turned an alarming shade of red. Watch your tone, young lady. I'm still your father. And then, something strange happened. His entire demeanor suddenly shifted. The anger vanished, replaced by an unsettling calmness that I recognized from childhood. It was the expression he wore when he was about to manipulate a situation to his advantage. Look, he said softly, I'm not here to fight. I want to put all this unpleasantness behind us. I'm willing to forgive what happened with Nathan, and I think it's time we all move forward as a family. The abrupt change gave me emotional whiplash. 1 minute he was telling me to watch my tone, and the next he was talking about forgiveness and family unity. I'm happy for you to stay here with your grandmother, he continued, his voice smooth as oil. All I want is what rightfully belongs to me. And there it was, his true motive. He wasn't here to reconcile or support Grandma. He was here for Grandpa's money. What Dad didn't know was that Grandpa had anticipated this. A day after the funeral, while sorting through Grandpa's desk, Grandma and I found a note tucked in the back of a drawer. It simply said, call Robert. Robert was Grandpa's longtime friend and attorney. When we contacted Robert, he informed us that Grandpa had updated his will just 2 months before he passed. He had left his modest savings to me, with the instruction that I use it to finish my education and help care for Grandma. The house had been transferred to Grandma's name exclusively, ensuring she would always have a place to live. Looking at Dad's expectant face, I felt a surge of righteous satisfaction. I know exactly why you're here, Dad, I said calmly. And I'm sorry to tell you that Grandpa left his savings to me, not you. The house belongs solely to Grandma. There's nothing here for you to claim. The shock on his face was almost comical. His mouth opened and closed silently for a few seconds before his expression contorted with rage. That's impossible, he sputtered. He can't have done that. You must have manipulated him, filled his head with lies about me. I shook my head. Grandpa made these decisions long before he passed. Robert can verify everything. Mom finally spoke up, her voice tight with desperation. Sweetheart, surely you can see this isn't right. After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me? I repeated incredulously. Like accusing me of trying to steal my sister's husband? Or kicking me out right before finals? Or skipping your own father's funeral to go on a cruise? Wasn't it enough that you tried to steal Megan's happiness? Mom shot back. Now you want us to suffer financially too? I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I never did anything to Megan or Nathan. Those messages were fake. And I'm not keeping you from anything that's rightfully yours. Grandpa made his choice. They left in a fury, Dad practically dragging Mom out the door while muttering threats about contesting the will and making me regret my decision. The house felt eerily quiet after they left, and I sank onto the couch next to Grandma, who reached over to squeeze my hand. You did the right thing, she said softly. Your grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. In the days that followed, I focused on helping Grandma adjust to life without Grandpa. We established new routines, morning coffee on the porch, afternoons spent going through old photo albums, evenings watching her favorite game shows. Ethan had to return to his internship, but he called every night to check on us. Then, about a month after my parents' visit, a letter arrived from Robert. It contained additional information about Grandpa's estate that he hadn't initially shared with us. Apparently, Grandpa had purchased a rundown property in Florida years ago, a dilapidated house that was more of a liability than an asset due to unpaid taxes and maintenance issues. The letter explained that Grandpa had set up a special condition in his will: if my parents contested his decisions or tried to make any legal claim on his estate, the Florida property would automatically transfer to them, along with just enough funds to cover the immediate tax bill, effectively becoming a financial burden rather than a windfall. Sure enough, Robert called a few days later to inform me that my parents had hired a lawyer and were planning to contest the will. When their case was inevitably dismissed by the judge, the trust kicked in, and they became the proud owners of a crumbling house with significant debt attached to it. Their financial situation quickly deteriorated as they tried and failed to sell the property. No one wanted to take on such a liability, and they found themselves trapped in Grandpa's perfectly executed plan. Just when I thought the drama might finally be over, my parents launched a new strategy. They began reaching out with apologies and pleas for reconciliation. Dad's messages talked about how he had reflected on his behavior and realized his mistakes. Mom sent tearful voicemails about how family should stick together and how Grandpa would want us to be united. They even enlisted Megan and Nathan in their campaign. Suddenly, my sister was texting me daily, talking about healing our relationship and moving forward together. It was suspicious how they all seemed to be reading from the same script, lots of talk about family bonds but no actual acknowledgement of the specific harm they had caused. I was genuinely confused about how to respond. Part of me wanted to maintain boundaries and protect what Grandpa had entrusted to me, but another part wondered if I should try to forgive them, even knowing their motives were likely financial rather than emotional. Then, completely unexpectedly, Megan showed up at Grandma's house one morning. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Before I could even ask what was wrong, she burst into tears in the entryway. Between sobs, she explained that she had discovered Nathan had been cheating on her. She had surprised him during a work trip, only to find him with another woman in his hotel room. During their confrontation, a truth came out that changed everything. The inappropriate texts that had been attributed to me were actually from one of Nathan's affairs. He had saved the woman's number under my name to avoid suspicion if Megan ever checked his phone. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. All this time, I had been ostracized, accused, and abandoned because of Nathan's lies. My family had chosen to believe the worst about me without a shred of evidence. What made it even worse was what happened when Megan went to our parents for support. Instead of standing by her, they urged her to forgive Nathan and make the marriage work. They were more concerned about maintaining appearances than their daughter's happiness and well-being. They told me to just get over it, Megan said, wiping her tears. Mom said that all men cheat eventually, and I should be grateful he has a good job and provides for me. Dad said divorce would be embarrassing for the family. Hearing this, I felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication that my innocence was finally proven, anger at how quickly my parents had condemned me while encouraging Megan to forgive actual betrayal, and surprisingly, genuine sympathy for my sister who was clearly devastated. Grandma immediately offered Megan the spare room, telling her she could stay as long as she needed. As for our parents, the revelation about Nathan seemed to have little impact on their behavior. They continued to reach out to me about healing the family, though their messages now had a desperate edge as they struggled with the financial burden of the Florida property. In a surprising turn of events, Dad eventually reached out to Grandma directly to apologize for missing Grandpa's funeral and for his behavior toward me. He assured her he wanted to make amends and repair the damage he had caused. Grandma listened to his apology but made it clear that it didn't change the terms of Grandpa's will. They still weren't getting any money or claim to the house. Surprisingly, Dad accepted this without argument. Whether this represents genuine growth or just the exhaustion of having tried every other avenue, I'm not sure yet. In recent conversations, Grandma has started discussing her own will. She hasn't shared this with the rest of the family, but she's planning to leave the house to Megan, who is now in the process of divorcing Nathan. I think it's a perfect decision. Megan needs stability after everything she's been through, and being part of our grandparents' legacy might help her heal. As for me, I'm continuing my psychology studies with the money Grandpa left me. I've started volunteering at a family counseling center, hoping to help others navigate difficult relationships. Ethan and I are discussing him transferring to a university closer to us once he finishes this semester. My relationship with my parents remains complicated. I'm not sure if we'll ever fully reconcile, but I'm learning that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who stand by you through difficult times, who believe in you even when others don't. So, Reddit, Ida for holding on to what Grandpa left me, even though my family is still trying to guilt me into sharing it with them? Should I try to forgive them and find a middle ground, or maintain the boundaries I've established? TLDR, my parents kicked me out after falsely accusing me of trying to steal my sister's husband. My grandparents took me in, but then my grandpa died and left his money to me instead of my dad. Now my family is trying to guilt me into sharing the inheritance, even though they're the ones who abandoned me in the first place.